Hi.
Hi. I am waiting for a couple of people, so we'll give them a couple of seconds to join us.
Can I
I know.
can I have permission to record? Mark, I'm looking at you.
I don't know if I can give you permission with green. Let me see. Share screen. Mm. But you will get this recording like 15 minutes afterwards, anyway. So,
All right, good. Because my little button to remind me to record is stuck on my computer.
stop. Allowed to record. Okay. All right, you're allowed to record, but my recording will give you automatic transcription too.
Oh, great.
So,
Mm-hmm.
which is nice.
That is nice. It's Friday, everyone. How you feeling about that?
Good. I have plans to chip away at my to-do list that Juliana has for me for homework. So I'm gonna have my martini tonight and be working on that, and then it's like another day.
It's Friday, and I learned one of the best tips from Juliana, which is, if you have a coffee cup, people don't know what's in it. It's like,
This is true. Not part of the hacks that we like to share, but this is true. All right, we have a couple of other people that might be straggling along, but our VIP section is here, so that is really important. All right, so this is gonna be a little bit different than our usual Tinker Talks, right? So our usual Tinker Talk format is very much fireside chat. This is going to be more of a workshop format, where Allyns, who is a megastar when it comes to behavioral science, human resources, people capital, people resources, pick your name or nomenclature for it. She is just so good around really being able to master the communications that we need for our organization to scale. And especially when you're in the seven figures, where we start to step out of creating the systems as much, right? Like we're still in optimization mode. You guys know, create, standardize, optimize, right? So we're still in optimization mode. But then we have a little clink in the system. The clink is called people. If people don't manage the processes, they don't mean shit. So I'm gonna have Allyns take it from here. And as people are coming through, I'll just kind of put in the chat like kind of what we're doing, so we don't have to interrupt and redo the whole thing all over again. Cool. For efficiency's sake, Allyns, I will manage the chat, so that way.
Good.
Cool.
And you interrupt me whenever you want to ask a question or whatever it is that you need. So I'm going to share my screen and just kind of get into what I want to talk about today, which is difficult conversations. So first, a little bit about me. I've got 24 years in the HR industry. I work with several clients of various sizes, usually under 100, to really figure out their HR, their human capital. If you've got people running your business, you need to figure out how people work. And one of the parts of that is also like figuring out how to have these difficult conversations so you can get the most that you can out of the people that work for you. I'm also a professor at Temple University, working with William Patterson University and also working with Hampton University on some programs in the fall. So without further ado, we're going to get started. So how many of you so far have had difficult conversations that you dreaded? Yeah. How do you feel about that? How do you feel going into a difficult conversation?
Anxiety.
Yeah. Why?
Same.
It's like the never ending dread of like, ugh. I think that feeling for me is ugh.
Yeah, because you never know how someone's going to respond, right? Like if you go into this unknown, no matter how you prep, there's like not enough prep to get you ready for their responses. So we're going to go over just a bunch of different scenarios and talk about difficult conversations. So there are also these emotional moments, right? It's either an emotional moment for you to have to give this feedback that's really difficult, or an emotional moment for them to receive it, right? You're never sort of unified in your emotions. Like you're not both going into it like, can't wait to talk how terribly I did on that assignment the other day. Like no one's really looking at that. So often emotions are also pent up going into these conversations on both sides. So talk about feedback. So feedback is used to describe information about an actual behavior that you want to adjust, that you want to maintain, or you want to improve, or you want to move forward. And so I want to talk about the structure of giving feedback. So when you give feedback, you have to determine who's the best person to give it to. Here's an example of when somebody's trying to give feedback and they don't give it to the right person. Let's say I talk to Mark and say, Juliana, I got to tell you some things about her. I'm not giving the feedback to Mark. I shouldn't be talking to Mark about feedback that I have for Juliana. I have to give it to her directly. So sometimes we kind of defer to someone else and give them the feedback because it's easier to not give it to someone's face. But the problem is that you're now creating a different kind of emotion, right? Now you're getting people on board to understand how upset you are about the other person. And that's not a good look, right? Not a good look for you as a manager. So you really want to be direct about who is this feedback for? I need to go straight to Juliana to give her this feedback instead of going to Mark, right? So I need you to identify who's this for. Is it a manager that you work with? Is it an employee? Is it a peer? Is it leadership? And I'm going to throw in there family or friend. Sometimes we do this with our family or friends. Like, I don't want to tell my son the feedback because I just don't want to go into this conversation with him. So I'm going to tell my husband how I feel about this. No, I got to go talk to my son about this, right? So when you go into these conversations, you need to have the right mindset. Like your right mindset. Like, no, it just happened. You're really upset. Check your how. What's your how? Your how is how you show up. If you are upset and your how is off, don't have that conversation. You have to have it after you've had a night's sleep, after you've had some chance to think about it. Maybe you need some coaching. And I have here, silence the noise. There's noise that goes on in our head, right? That noise of like, how are they going to respond? Do I really have all the facts? This didn't go well the last time. You keep all this noise in your head and your mindset's not clear. So you need to be silencing the noise, and then you're going to get your points together. You can't just go into a feedback conversation and a difficult conversation without having all your points written down. So the next point I want to make is make your intentions clear. You go into a conversation and you think about, all right, I'm afraid that they're just going to blow up on me or they're just going to shut down. I want you to think about being clear. This is about us having a collaborative conversation. You can't go in on a one-way conversation. You have to have a two-way conversation with folks. So make sure that when you go in, you're saying, this is about us having a conversation collaboratively. We need to come up with solutions together. So I also want to note that when you are preparing for a difficult conversation, there are very many different ways to do it. You can either talk to someone on the phone, you can do a video conference, you can go over Slack, you can give feedback over email, you can meet them at a coffee shop. But don't ever use social media to indirectly give somebody some feedback. Let me tell you a story. So a friend of mine called me up and said, hey, my best friend is really upset with me. And I said, well, what happened? And he said, she did not invite me to her mom's wedding. We've been friends since we were kids. And I said, did you call her up and talk to her about how upset you were that you found out you weren't invited to this wedding? He goes, no. So I posted an Instagram post, a hypothetical, and said, how would you feel if your best friend didn't invite you to their parents, their mom's wedding? And I said, why would you do it? It's such an indirect communication. Why don't you just call her up and say, why didn't you invite me to my mom's wedding? So when people say, like, how do you give feedback over internet, like over Instagram or social media? That is a roundabout way of getting other people on your side before you can directly handle this with the person. It was unnecessary. And I said, listen, that was not the right move. Let's talk about you picking up the phone and calling her right now. So think about what's the right vehicle. A lot of times, if it's a difficult conversation, it should not be done over email unless you're documenting a conversation you've already had. So you definitely want to make sure that you're using the right avenue. So here's what I call mind mapping your feedback. So for example, we're going to role play this later on. So think very carefully of how we approach this. So deadlines. Let's say I am your employee, right? Allyns works for you. And for some reason, I have been inconsistent. I've been missing deadlines, not all of them, some of them, and I've been very inconsistent. My attention to detail on my finalized work is also super low. And also, you've noticed that my workload has not increased over the past 3 months, right? So when you mind map what you want to talk about, you write down the points, the main points, objective points that you want to make. And then you come up with on your own before the conversation, a few possible solutions. But remember what I told you, this is a two-way conversation. So when you're coming up with solutions, you can't just say, and here are the solutions, right? You have to think about, remember that two-way conversation. We're going to talk through this now. So possible solutions for Allyns working for you is to track your time. Let's see what you're spending your time on. Go over the editing tips, take a time management course. There's some free ones on the internet. So I want to really focus on your responses, right? So have you been in the position where you've prepared your feedback and you've talked to someone and you don't know how to respond? If you can share with me an example of when you were kind of blank in a response, so we can kind of talk through that before we get into the next couple slides.
Looking at you.
So if you ever had a conversation where you feel like you're shutting the person down, it could be one thing, could be the use of the word but versus and. So I don't know if you've ever seen people talk and they use the word but, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, you don't like my idea. Oh, I just didn't meet your expectations. So the word but actually excludes or dismisses everything that follows it, or it negates things or cancels it. And it may be seen very, very sort of subordinate, right? If you use the word and, it expands things. It acknowledges it. It creates this more like neutral and positive environment as opposed to like shutting it down. Here's some examples. So I walk into your office, your virtual office, or I call you and I ask for your support, right? Bad timing. You're about to jump on a client call, you're about to have a meeting, or you have to leave. And this is what you say to me. I really understand you want my help on this, but my schedule is packed full. How can you switch this around so that it includes the word and doesn't shut me down? And this is about the psyche, right? This is about keeping the person's listening open as opposed to shutting it down with the word but. How would you redo this sentence? Anyone can go.
I'm struggling trying to figure that out. So
Yeah. So I'm going to help you out.
Okay.
There you go.
Wait, take it back.
Take it back.
I didn't read it, but
Okay, Cam, tell me. How would you say it?
I'll say, I really understand, you want me to help you on this. And this is really important to me. Can we find time on your calendar to accomplish this next week?
So instead of saying, but my schedule is packed full, you left the listening open as opposed to feeling like, oh, I'm just intruding on his time and I'm not, I'm not able to get the help that I need. So you're giving a solution as well, which is great. So here's how to switch out the and. Trying to click on it. Okay, I really understand you want my help on this presentation and my schedule is packed full. And I love what you added, which was, and then let's get on my calendar so we can continue this conversation later, right? Like don't shut the person down. Then I bring in the concept of pausing. There are some times where people use the word but, shuts down the listening of the other person. And then there's sometimes where the and keeps it open. And sometimes you don't even need the and. Sometimes you could just pause. So for example, I really understand you want my help on this presentation. My schedule is packed full today. Let's schedule something for another day. So that one simple tip can really help keep the other person's listening open as opposed to shutting it down. How about this one? Your employee says, I'm meeting deadlines, right? In response to what we just mind mapped. In response to your feedback about them not meeting deadlines. This is your typical answer. Meeting deadlines has been inconsistent. You meet some, but the rest are left undone. How can you change this?
You must be listening to me talk.
she microchipped your golf balls. So, I mean, I don't know, because I'm such a numbers person. Like, what if you add numbers to this, right? Like, hey, you're meeting 82% of the deadlines, and what are we gonna do about the other?
I love it. Such a big shift, right? Because we've always been taught to use the word but. But isn't everything, but we don't realize the effect it has on the other person, right? It does shut down listening. It creates this moment of negativity when it doesn't need to be negative. So meeting deadlines has been inconsistent. You meet some and the rest are left undone. That continues this like collaborative conversation. These small little tweaks will really help your responses. So now let's talk about something really bad. let's say you start talking about meeting deadlines and I say, well, it's that time of the month. I get very, very tough migraines when it's that time of the month. What in the world do you say? Give it a chance.
I understand. I also say like, hey, I understand things come up. We all have like personal things or business things, and we're supportive, make sure everyone has a balance. But how can I help you organize, your schedule so that knowing that this is something that comes up around this time, that we just make sure you're not losing, traction or something like that.
Great. So bring it back to the objective, right? Let's just go back to talking about deadlines and let's try to find a solution that will help you during this time. What else? Someone discloses something very, 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 very serious. I'm being tested for brain cancer or something, or I'm awaiting my results for a cancer screening. What do you say? Like, that's why I'm not meeting deadlines. I'm really distracted with that.
I think it's still important to acknowledge, like, hey, I'm sorry you're feeling that way, or I'm sorry that that's happening, but, and then also offering support in some way, but then it still has to come back down to figuring out how to achieve the common goal.
Right. Right. So there's this moment of empathy, and I can understand how that is really difficult to focus on the work and to also focus on this. And I do want to bring it back to what the expectations are. And I want you to make sure that you utilize whatever time off you have, and that we are getting the work done for our office and for our clients and for whatever, the objective is. So there's that moment of like, medical disclosure can really throw you for a loop. And sometimes you might get yourself in trouble liability wise if you say things to someone about the medical disclosure. So for example, I had a client who had an employee who disclosed to them that they are trying to figure out their ADHD medication and their antidepressant medication. And she went into this whole rant about like, well, aren't you seeing a therapist? Shouldn't you see a psychologist? Shouldn't you see a psychiatrist to get you a better prescription? And I was like, oh my gosh. So if you're someone who might go into this mode and you don't know how to handle it, and yet you're the one who needs to have the answers to everything, maybe you're the person on top, or maybe you're the person in charge. And so there's something that happens where you can always defer to HR even though you don't have them. So pretend you are HR, right? So like, you know what? That sounds like an HR thing. I've got this team of people who help me out with this. I need to speak to my HR advisor. Buy yourself some time. Don't respond, especially when it's something that could be a liability. Speak to HR, speak to an attorney, decide what the next best course of action is. Give yourself some time. I was in the process of letting this woman go. We had her on a performance improvement plan. She was literally out the door. And she had told me the reason why I've been struggling, and I'm literally requesting a reasonable accommodation for you to give me some more time to figure this out, because I'm having a hard time with this medication that I'm taking. And at this point, I'm like, you are in the middle of being let go. Like literally, you have 14 days before I give you the final answer, which is letting you go. And so I said, you know what? I needed to talk to my team, right? I said, and the team was me. I just couldn't give her an answer right away because I really had to think it through. So I said, you know what? I just need to talk to my HR team about this and I'll get back to you. They don't need to know it's still you, but you could just buy yourself some time. Don't get yourself in trouble. Go talk to other people and figure out like, what am I supposed to do? I also recently had a conversation with a candidate who said, and by the way, I'm due in July, I'm pregnant. And so like, does this job have maternity leave? And I'm like, we can talk about that closer we get into the process. I completely felt like I was being catfished, and you never know when you are going to be by someone. So I bought myself in some time. I said, listen, we get further down the process, we'll talk about that. But right now I'm really focused on figuring out whether you have the right experience for the role. Not even saying right fit for the role, because that can mean so many things. Again, what you say can be interpreted a different way. So you want to just make sure that you give yourself some time. So some words to avoid when you are having a difficult conversation is this. How many of us have used, to be honest, we use it. We use these like weasel words, these filler words that don't add to the conversation. They shut people down. What about no offense, but you could do this. I know you could do this, right? You're trying to be positive, but you use the word no offense. How does that help my morale? Doesn't help me at all. Do I really want to work for someone who's saying that? Or what about this? I'm sure you know how to do this. You've been doing this for 2 years. I'm sure you've got the tools in place. I've provided them. Or what about this one? If I were you. Don't we love this one? How many times have I had employees tell me, my manager tells me all the time that when they were my age, or when they were me, or when they had only a year of experience, or whatever it was, it's like, guess what? Nobody wants to be compared. Nobody wants to be compared. So you definitely want to try to take these words out. Again, keeps the listening open. This one's a tricky one, right? So when you say like, this has been a problem for a while, and let's say this is the first time you're really having a deep conversation with someone, they are not excited about that. Like, what? This has been going on for months and now you tell me about this? Or you can say, we've had several conversations about this over the past few months, and we are not going to make progress if we don't have a deeper conversation about how this impacts your performance, right? There's all these ways that you can say the same message, but you don't need to use these words that shut down listening. What about this one? Be more like Mark. Be more like Shasta. Is that how you say your name?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Be more like Shasta. Be more like Cam. Be more like Juliana. Be more like Allyns, right? Like you have all these kind of moments of like, why isn't this person working like this person? This person's so good at this. Or why can't I get them to be like this person? Guess what? Nobody wants to be compared. You could totally do that in your head. Just don't say it out loud. Just don't put it out there. Try to keep yourself and them, again, listening open. Has anybody heard of the 733-55 rule? Oh my gosh, this is what negotiators use in communicating effectively. So the 733-55 rule is essentially the outcome of 100% effective communication. So it's 7% is what we actually say, which has got a lot of impact to it. 38% is our tone of voice, has a ton of impact. And then 55% is our body language. So we're going to get a little bit more into this. But have you ever had a conversation with, I don't know if you have children or with like a teenager? Ever had a conversation with a teenager? Ever have a conversation with a younger kid? Ever have a conversation with someone who's really stubborn no matter what age they are? Do you ever notice how they trigger you? You know how people trigger you? It's like, I've said this 20 times, like, how else do you want me to say it? You can't, it's so difficult to remain consistent in your delivery and in your tone of voice when no one is listening that you want them to listen. So I want to get into like talking about tone of voice, because like I said, 7% is the spoken word, which we went over, talked about some tips to keep the listening open. And now let's talk about that tone of voice. So who here is calm naturally? I am not. Who here is calm naturally? Oh, look at that one. Okay. So when you're calm and someone amps you up, what happens? How do you process that? How do you appear to other people? Can they see you getting upset?
I'm really good at hiding it.
Yeah.
Hiding it. What about those in the room who are not naturally calm? What happens when you get upset? Yeah, that's me too.
Like everything's on my emotions. Like I can't stop my facial expressions. Like it's just.
No, when I get very calm, people get very scared.
So one of the things that we want to do is practice being calm. These are those moments of emotionally separating yourself from the situation and from the content, right? This is why the mind mapping is so important, because for those who aren't as calm as others, it's so difficult to remain on track because you're like, what? But come on, I told you 15 times, right? You have to remain calm. So, you know, when people are negotiating or people are in a moment of trying to get another person to truly listen and do what is being told of them to do, the calm will always win. The calm will always win, because when you get agitated and they're responding emotionally to your agitation, the conversation's going in a different direction. So definitely practice being calm. And so your tone of voice is crucial, because if you do enter into a heated conversation, guess what? You got to get yourself out of it. I don't want to get myself out of those conversations. I want to be out of that conversation with like resolution and moving on to better things and feeling good. Like that was a tough conversation, but we left feeling good that we have some solutions. So if it gets heated, you're not leaving that conversation well. You're actually going to prolong that conversation to another day. So a voice can have a mismatching tone to what you're saying. And I want to kind of highlight the two different tones that do get confused for the wrong message. So one is the questioning tonality. You ever talk with someone who's like, so did you really want to do it that way? I'm doing it like exaggerated so you can hear my pitch. Did you really want me to have this conversation again with you? Or the other one is the lacking the higher frequency can also sound too strong. Like, are we really having this conversation again? Do we really need to talk about this one more time? Right? That's the tone I use with my kids, right? That's the one I try to do, because the other one is like, makes me sound a little nervous. The way that you say things will truly get a response that you're looking for or not. So let's say that I really want Mark to stop using that cup. I don't know, right? Like the cup that you had with some liquid in it that I'm not sure. You know, do you really need to show everybody that you're using that cup while we're meeting? Or, you know, hey, you know, tell me the reason behind the cup, right? Like there's all these different ways that you can say things and use your tone at your advantage. And remember, your goal is to suppress the emotions from rising. So when you are naturally calm, awesome, let's stay in that same thing. And sometimes you have to draw that inflection in your voice to bring some extra tone to it. But try to keep your tone as even and neutral and objective as possible so that if someone gets agitated, you're remaining calm and you counterbalance it. So sometimes we're in the conversation, you may find yourself asking the person, why? What happens when someone asks you why? What do? You immediately get what? What's the word? The big D word.
Defensive.
Yes. Why did you do that, Shasta? Why didn't you just give it to me on time? Cam, why'd you do that? Right? There's this like accusatory tone. So these are called calibrated questions. So calibrated questions, they feel like calibrated questions are the antithesis of feeling like you're being interrogated. So the question why always creates defensiveness most of the time. Why did you miss that deadline? Why did you do that? Why are we having this conversation again? Very, very accusatory and does feel like I have to give you a defensive answer because I did this or because I did that. So if we have this conversation and we shift to like how and what, and you can use the other questions as well. What can we put in place to help you meet those deadlines? What can I do better to support you in your work? How do we move forward from here? This is about including the person in the conversation and not putting them in the position to be defensive. So when we're having this deadline conversation, we want to use these calibrated questions and not the why. So body language, go ahead.
Oh, Allyns, I have a question. Can you go back to the last slide? So is there an escalation in these calibrated questions, right? So for example, the first time you say like, what can I do to support you, right? Cool. The fifth time is like, you know, in your brain, you're like, fuck you, I've done everything I possibly can. It's like, I did the system, I put it in here, I got you all the support, I got you the extra training, I got you, right? And I mean, and obviously we're probably then talking about a PIP plan or something like that, right? But like, is there sort of like I'm like in my brain, right? Like I'm thinking like there should be almost like an escalator of escalated calibrated questions, right? Like does something like that exist?
It exists when you have an actual situation because so many of them are so different. There's no like secret sauce to get all of them into this like deeper mode. So what I would say for that one, like I've done everything possible for you, right? Like I can't say that, but what I want to say in my head is I've done everything for you. How could you not be so grateful? Why are you not meeting deadlines? I would say, you know,
you're lucky you have a job.
Oh gosh, I read an article about that last night. Like they are. So I would definitely in that specific situation say, we have provided quite a bit of resources so far. Tell me which ones have been effective and which ones have not. So I can understand how we can move forward from here, right? Like you've got to get them to talk. And there's a technique called mirroring, where you take the information that someone says and you repeat it back to get more information, right? So if they say, you know, you've given me a sauna, but it's difficult. It's difficult? Tell me a little bit more about that. figure out what about it. Like maybe you'll find out that they're lazy and they just don't want to enter information into Asana, right? Like you're just going to get some more by just mirroring those questions and also working with the calibrated questions. So it's not like, why don't you just learn it? Why don't you just take the time and do it? So you want to definitely use the calibrated questions and then also do some mirroring as well to kind of get a little bit deeper. Because when you get deeper, you'll find a better solution, or you realize they're just not good in the job and they just need to be let go.
Now she's spying on me.
Why do you think I asked the question?
Right. And so when you get deeper and you realize that the person's not a fit for the role, you have, because this is a big Department of Labor thing. Department of Labor does not like to see people lose their jobs. And I have been on the receiving end of many different documents that the Department of Labor sends and says, you did not give this person a fair shot at really performing at their job. This is why these conversations are important to have. And then we're going to talk about like how you document them. You simply word for word, write down the things that you talked about, which is why the mind mapping is so important. You've already mind mapped your documentation. The Department of Labor would love to see what you specifically spoke about and what solutions you came up with together and what time frame they had to get better at their role. Because once you let somebody go, and I'm not throwing severance money at people, I'm telling you right now, I do not have money to throw severance. I want them to get out because I've given them the opportunity and I don't owe them anything other than that chance to do better. That's what we do. So once you determine that the person is not a good fit for the role, have you had the conversations? Have you had documented conversations? Have they been given the resources that you're able to give them that can help them succeed for the role? When you've established that, chances are you're not going to get anybody saying that you unfairly treated someone or you discharged them inappropriately because you've done what you needed to do. Body language. So do you want to talk to this employee? No. What do you think you're going to get? Meh. Or an argument, right? You see this, arms folded across the chest. You see the crinkled eyebrows. I always see my middle son. He's always like this. And I'm like, so then I start doing it with him. Tell me why. It seems you're upset right now. Tell me what's going on. You know, I bring down my like, what do you call it? Like that late night radio voice, you know? So I just try to bring him down to a different level. So when I see this kind of body, I'm like, it seems you're upset right now. Tell me what's going on. Just simple, just get to it. And listen, sometimes you don't want to engage with this type of person. And sometimes I have to engage with this kind of person. I'm in HR. This is the type of person that comes to me first before they go to their manager, and I diffuse this before they actually have the conversation. You might get a muted version of this person, or you just might get this person. So sometimes you might be this person. Let's say you're having a conversation and you're getting upset, and this is now you. How do you think the employee feels? You think they want to talk to you? You think they're respecting you? You think you're in control? You think your message is coming across the right way? No. So you really want to be cognizant of what this body language looks like. So here's some tips, right? You want to open up your arms. You want to have a conversation. And let me tell you, video, you can show your body language over video, and it tells a lot about it tells your story. So, use your hands. I take notes, I use my pen, even if I may not be writing it, everything word for word. You want to show up open to have this conversation. Relax your shoulders, nod, use active listening. Make sure that you're understanding, like, oh, I understand. Tell me more about that. Engage, mirror. You got to really listen to what someone's saying. And like, oh, I'm missing deadlines because I'm really just overwhelmed. You'd say, you're overwhelmed? What's overwhelming? Go in and talk. Bless you. Slightly mirror the other person's gestures. So we're mirroring on tone, and we're mirroring on like keeping the situation kind of low, but you're also mirroring their gestures, and you want to be at eye level. So you know what? My mother is a genius. She told me a very long time ago, get down to your son's level so they feel like they're not looking up to you and you're looking down to them. Genius mom. She's not even like, a behavioral analyst. She's just my mom. But she also said to me that that's the best way to get any person of any age to listen to you. So in video, make sure you look at that camera. Make sure that you look at that green dot or blue dot or whatever dot. That is important because now they feel like you're connecting. Virtually, it's a little bit more difficult. In person, you could really show a lot more of that being in the conversation. So definitely eye level. And if you do have children, I have to get down on the floor for some time. Now it's like, I got to put him on the counter to get him on eye level with me. So think about how this really does open up things for you. And now let's talk about emotions. So the most unpredictable part about having difficult conversations are these emotions from these people. You don't know what you're going to get. And sometimes you do. And sometimes you don't get what you need. And sometimes you're the one trying so hard in the conversation. And sometimes you're just so frustrated you don't even want to have the conversation anymore. So I want you to use this technique of reflecting back their emotion that you're picking up and learn more about where we are with them. It seems we're not getting anywhere. Let's continue this conversation in the morning. It seems this conversation is upsetting you. Let's reconvene tomorrow. This is when you hit a wall. When you hit a wall and the person is just like not about it, or is like, I'm done. I don't want to have this conversation anymore. I would say, you know what? It seems like this is upsetting you. Let's talk tomorrow. I don't want to talk tomorrow. You know, we really need to talk about the expectations of the job. So why don't we just take a break and we'll talk tomorrow? You really have to think about having those words ready to go when you need to just stop the conversation and reconvene. This does not mean you reconvene in a week. This does not mean you don't ever reconvene. This means that the next day or the next possible moment within 1 or 2 days, you must convene this conversation. Does that make sense? How many of you are much more ready to have a difficult conversation? Because I need 2 volunteers. Who would like to go first?
Come, Shasti, or be voluntold.
Yeah, so what I want you to do, I'm going to play an employee. I am going to be an employee, and I want someone to take the mind map that we already created and be the manager. Your goal here is to deliver these 3 points of feedback to me, objective feedback. Remember not to use those buzzwords like if I were you, or why aren't you as good as so-and-so? And I want you to give me objective feedback. And when we get to the point where you and I are talking about solutions, make it a collaborative conversation. And guess what? I'm not going to be an easy employee. So get ready to be challenged. Who wants to go first? Anyone? I've got 4.
All right, let's do this.
All right, Cam. Cam, am I saying your name right?
Like .com.
Com. All right, Com. Now I'm saying your name right. Let's go ahead and get into our conversation. So start.
I want to make sure I'm saying, is it Allyns?
Allyns.
Allyns? Allyns. Okay. Hi, Allyns. Thanks for taking the time today to connect and chat. And I really wanted to kind of have a better understanding of what's going on, and so that we can help you, hit some of the goals that you're doing here.
Sounds good, Com.
Great. So tell me what's going on. What's happening?
I mean, I feel like I'm getting the work done. Is there a problem with my work?
Oh, okay, I see. So the premise was I called you in. I thought you came to me.
So you want to talk to me about these deadlines. So these are your points. You want to make your points, and then we will get into a whole conversation.
Meeting down. All right. Also, do you want me to kind of like touch on each of these boxes?
Yep.
Gotcha. All right. So we've noticed, and I've heard from some of our clients that, there's some been inconsistencies with meeting deadlines in the past month.
Okay.
Do you feel, or have you noticed that at all? Or do you feel like, there's anything, from a deadline standpoint, have you noticed that you might be missing anything?
I just have too much work on my plate, Com. I think that you guys are working me way too hard, and I don't have time to sign off at 5 o'clock and eat dinner with my family.
Oh, I'm sorry that's happening. I'm obviously, I'm a big proponent of family. As you can see, I have my daughter here with us. So I know several times we've had conversations, and we share it with the team members that, you should, if there's anything that you need, or you feel like you're not having enough time, or you're working too hard, let us know. And this is a great opportunity right now to talk that out. If you haven't got a chance to feel comfortable to share that you've been having too much work on your plate. So tell me a little bit more about like the work that you're working on that you feel like you have a lot. That's just there's a lot of things moving and juggling for yourself.
Well, I'm waiting for Susie to get me this report, and then she takes too long. So it leaves me like 5 minutes to get you what you need. And I'm just overwhelmed. I think that there's way too much on my plate and you're asking too much and I'm really frustrated with the other people on the team.
Okay. So it seems like there's a lot of different distractions that might be happening. Maybe just some challenges with organizing and prioritizing what you're working on. I mean, the workflow has been the same over the last 3 months or so. So it sounds like there might be, I think we just need to uncover and work together to figure out how are you breaking your day out and how are you prioritizing items?
Are you going to be micromanaging me now?
Nope. I just said, let's discuss what's going on. I just want to be able to support you and understand what you're working on. Because for an example, this happened with someone else on our team. And once we uncovered, there was a couple roadblocks that we were able to remove for her. It actually freed up her day to actually get everything completed.
I really don't like working with Susie. I don't like working with her. She's not nice.
Can you tell me a little bit more, like what's specific about her you don't like, or how she's not nice?
She has an attitude every time I ask her for the report, and then she gives it to me late, and then I don't have an attitude with her most of the time. But yeah, she upsets me. She pisses me off.
It's never fun, right? When you're working with someone that maybe you don't feel comfortable working with. I can figure out, we'll go back and figure out what's going on with Susie there. Maybe there's other things that we need to uncover to figure out what's happening there. Have you ever run into that with her in the past?
Yeah, all the time since she started.
All right, from day one. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you brought this up to us, because now that this is something we know that we can help you to kind of remove some roadblocks for you. What else is happening that we can help?
All right, and I'll stop here. All right, time. So we got feedback for Con. Con, how did you feel first in this meeting? Like, did you feel like I was resisting? Like, what were your thoughts on like Allyns the employee?
Yeah, I think the shortness is like, obviously they don't feel comfortable being in this conversation.
Yeah.
So I got to figure out a way to get that person to feel comfortable and say, no, this is a collaboration and we're here to help. It's not an interrogation. It's not punitive.
Right.
But I think the goal is once you get people talking, then they start to kind of like flow.
The trick is to get somebody to realize what's in it for them. Because if they feel like it's just a performance conversation, this is about everything they did wrong, that goes in their head, as opposed to my goal here is for you to succeed. And in order for you to succeed, we want to just talk about what kind of roadblocks you're experiencing on getting these deadlines done on time, right? Like that can be a tactic you use in opening up that person's listening, because it's about them. Guess what, Con? They're only interested in them. They are only interested in them. Everyone is only interested in themselves. And so if you lead with the what's in it for them, and answer that up front, that can be very helpful for them. Any feedback from the rest of the team on how Con did?
I thought he flowed well, but I think she did a really good job, or you did a really good job of derailing the kind of like the finger pointing, right? And then he kind of took the bait. But then it didn't bring him back to any other deadlines that she missed that were not dependent on this one individual, right? And so you were like, oh, I'm gonna take the conversation here. And so
right, I did. I deflected. I made it someone else's problem, right? I took the onus off of myself. I wasn't an employee who is about accountability, right? And that's something that you as a manager can address and say, listen, I will hold everyone accountable for what their deliverables are. And if Susie is causing a delay, why don't we all sit down and talk about the process next week? But let's get back to what we can do for you to get you moving on and getting your things over the goal line, right? Like you did, like I totally was like deflecting. It is not my fault. It's not my problem. I do my job. It's everyone else. It's you, it's Susie, it's everyone else but me. And that's what people do. They get defensive no matter what. So I agree. I do feel like you were being so accommodating to me because you wanted me to understand what you were saying. And then you did go back to like the whole workload thing and how it was the same. And so you were trying to bring me back.
Because I went through one, because we've done this. So, okay, fine. Susie's number one. What else is on your roadblock? What else? Because eventually we like the goals. I mean, the conversation would be longer than this. We summarize it. Okay, in summary, these are the things. But my goal is to make sure like I know what's going on, why she's missing these deadlines. And she knows there's clear accountability and how we're gonna come together to solve it.
Right. And we're going to try, because this is the part that takes difficult conversations to a whole nother level. Those responses completely derail all of your prep. The important thing is that you prep so that you have a specific roadmap to getting your points out and getting to solution as quickly as possible. And then you just jot some notes down and say, okay, so if Susie's interfering, we're going to get down to the bottom of Susie. We'll probably just do a meeting with her. All right. So who would like to take the second mind map? Okay, reveal, quality of work. So I'm going to walk you through this one because we haven't seen this one yet. I want to let you know, right, that the emails are going out to clients with grammar and spelling issues, Allyns, right? Like, I've got all these issues. And I also do paragraph upon paragraph upon paragraph upon paragraph, as opposed to like a good paragraph, some bullet points, get to the point and move on. And so the client also told you that they don't want to get any more emails from me. And this is really tough feedback to get, right? Like, hey, I'm kind of taking you off this account, or I'm moving your roles and responsibilities to more of a back end role as opposed to a front end role. But let's just say that the client just was like, you know what? I don't want Allyns communicating with us anymore. I just can't read her emails. And so the mind map looks a little different, because I've got a ton of different suggestions we could go down this path. It almost sounds like this is like, okay, really, really tough feedback. I'm taking you off this client account on the communication on the client account. But these are all the things I want you to do. I want you to use Grammarly. I want you to take the class on professional brevity that we have available in our little database. I want you to observe and learn from the communication that the client's going to be getting. I want you to send communication to me for editing. And I want us to decide what's the timetable to get back on this client account to do communication for the client. So who would like to take the quality of work and give me feedback? Because I'm going to get upset that I'm being taken off a client account.
Shasta, you ready? You ready for this? It's not like we did anything really specific for you guys or anything like that.
Nothing is by design. Nothing that you put out there.
No processes here.
All right. So Shasta, do you want to play?
Yeah, I'm wrapping my brain around it.
All right. So quickly to go over the points again. You saw that my emails are just not, grammar and hard edits and things, and the emails are just not great, and they're really long. And by the way, the client doesn't want you on emails anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it. So now I'm already on the defensive because I know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to touch base with you about the emails that have been going out to the client. Have noticed and have had some feedback from the client that there are a lot of grammar and spelling issues. And so I want to talk about ways that we can work together to make sure that that doesn't continue to happen.
I know what's going on here. I mean, I do the best I can on these emails, and they always want this information in there, and I have to do it quickly and send it out. So like, what do you want me to do?
Well, I think that there's probably a couple of things that we could do. We could potentially set up a template if it's information that they're asking for on a regular basis to keep the amount that you're having to do, like last minute at a minimum. But I'd also probably try using Grammarly and just run it through a quick edit before sending it out to do a double check, just to make sure that everything is.
I don't know how much more of this I can take. I'm like anxious all the time. There's so much information. I have a ton of deadlines. I'm trying to meet all of them. I heard from another employee that her manager's talking to her about meeting deadlines too. And we're all like really, really anxious right now. I also live in this small New York City apartment, and I need to talk to a therapist because I am really, really, really feeling like my mental health right now is jeopardized.
You know what? And I completely understand. I know that the deadlines can be crazy. And so I appreciate that is something that's probably really, really tough. one thing that we are going to be doing right now is for the time being, we are going to have someone else take over the lead communication
What?
on this account.
Really? Are you
Mhm.
serious? Like, what's going to happen? Am I going to lose my job?
You're not going to lose your job, but we do want to reestablish with the client that we are able to
I don't think I can
communicate.
continue this conversation anymore. My anxiety is going through the roof. I don't think I can talk anymore.
Okay, well, why don't we circle back to this tomorrow and we can pick up and talk about how we can move forward from here.
I don't know if I want to talk about it tomorrow.
We do need to complete the conversation because the important thing is that we come up with a plan that we can work on together so that we can get past this and get you back onto the account.
Okay, time. Thanks for being brave, both of you. All right, feedback for Shasta. Well, first, Shasta, how did you feel?
You know, it's like you get put on the defensive and you're like, whoa, I'm trying to help you. You know, but it's not really any different than conversations that have actually happened or one that I'm having this afternoon. So yeah.
Great, perfect timing. The one thing I wanted to hear more was what's in it for me. I want you to succeed, right? Like, what is it that you genuinely want the person to know about this conversation and why this conversation is so important, as opposed to saying, this is what we need for the client, or this is what we need for the role, or like, I need you to meet expectations. But you could say, meeting these expectations means that you will grow. And I guarantee you tackle this issue, we get you back on the client communication, and you will grow. And so, any feedback, any team members, what do you think?
I like putting it that way, though. Meeting expectations means that you'll grow.
Yep. I mean, you threw a lot of curveballs at her in a short period of time. So she didn't address the mental health part. I didn't know.
Yeah. And and I was going to, and then it's like, oh, I don't want to talk anymore. I'm like, okay, so now I'm going to pivot.
So think about it. What would you respond? If you could respond differently, what would it be? And so we could have a conversation about that.
Well, I mean, the way that I approach it, whether it's mental health or anything else, if somebody has something where they need to take care of themselves, they need to do that first and foremost, because, like, their health, their well-being is key. So it would be, I want to encourage you to see your therapist, see your physician, whatever it is you need to do, use your time off, get whatever assistance that you need. And there's actually been a time where I've proactively offered someone, like, hey, I think, because they just told me that they have something, like, I proactively told them that they should request a reasonable accommodation. Here's a form for you to fill out. Here's a form I want you to take to your doctor where they can, because I want us to be able to work together to get you past this, where this isn't going to be something that puts your job at jeopardy. Because if we can do this piece, I can help you and help give you some protection.
Right. And you can remind them of those resources, right? Like, oh my goodness, well, thanks for sharing that with me. There are resources available to you. And we can, you can go over it then if you're versed, or you can say, why don't I convene with my HR person and then send you an email with those resources, and we can get through this, right? And to me, the most important thing is that you are in a great place mentally and physically, so that you can come back and perform the expectations of the job. And I don't ever want you to think that I want to put work above you. But I do want to remind you that we have deliverables that need to be met. And so I'm willing to accommodate what's reasonable. And I'm also have to think about, how do we accommodate what we've contracted with our clients for? So there's two things that are important, and I want you to take care of you first before you can deliver on these, and we will figure it out, right? I just had a conversation yesterday with an employee who said to me, I want to learn a little bit more about your personal leave policy. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I said, well, it depends on what state you're in, right? Because that's also different. Virtually, you don't really know where people are. I know she's living in California, but she's a New York employee. I know California doesn't have the same structure we have in New York because we have a bigger people, like there's all this extra stuff. So if you never have if you don't have the answer to what you need to say, you could say, listen, that's an issue. We're going to tackle that. I will get you the resources. Give me a day, and in 24 hours, I'll turn something around to you via email so that you could see if those resources would be okay for you. And if you're okay, let's continue this conversation about expectations. And if she's not, you, again, just go back the next day. All right, next part is just open discussion. I just want to answer your questions. I want to, just talk about what fears you have, what anxieties you have around these difficult conversations, what challenges you faced, any coaching you need, Shasta, for this afternoon's conversation. Use me. You have me for a couple more minutes.
I mean, this afternoon is just giving somebody a written warning who's had lots and lots of verbal coaching, lots and lots of leeway, trying to work around things. And, something's been uncovered. That's just a fundamental thing that's not been happening. And so it has to escalate to a written warning,
Right.
Which I think I'm prepared for. It's just separating the emotion from liking this person and wanting him to succeed versus having to be firm about holding everybody to the same standards of accountability. And the truth of the matter is he may not make it. And
Right.
That's the hard part for me, because I want him to make it, but it just may not be a possibility at this point.
Right. And so what you're challenged with is you want to be fair to him,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to be fair to the others that work in your organization, and you want to be realistic with what you can tolerate for a specific period of time. And you would be doing him a disservice if you didn't have the conversation. And I think some people need to understand that you don't have to do a written warning. You can go straight to letting someone go, but we want to give you a chance, a fair shake at performing at the role and being clear what those expectations are and being clear about the timetable for achievement, right? And if you didn't think that he was capable of it, right? If I didn't think you were capable of doing this, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation right now. And I know that this might be a yucky conversation. I work with PR people, so they like the yucky conversation kind of tone. You may not want to be in this yucky conversation, but you know what? I'd be doing you a disservice if we weren't sitting down here and going through this in this level of detail. But I also need your commitment. So I want to close out by saying the commitment is important. Get them to say, I agree, I'm going to do this. And then put it in writing and have them write it back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do put something in writing, if you are going to say something that is subjective, like, I think you should do this, just talk about like the straight up objective facts. Like, here are the bullet points: must meet deadlines on time, must use this, you've got to do that. And if you're documenting how the conversation went, don't ever say she got upset. Tell me she cried. You've got to tell me what this is, because when the Department of Labor says, well, apparently she was crying the entire time. No, she wasn't. She was raising her voice, and she never got to the point where it was crying, right? Like, you literally have to do these things if somebody ever claims that you discriminated against them or you treated them unfairly. So always just use quotes on what you actually saw versus what you feel that person was doing. Like, she got upset, she got emotional. Those are throwaway words. Nobody cares about those words. What does that mean? Because if you told me she got emotional, I'm like immediately thinking she was like lip quivering, crying, like, I don't know. And maybe it was just, she was just, breathing heavy and like getting agitated or something like that. But you want to be actually clear about what your words mean and what they say. And especially when you're doing this, like, always practice, use each other as a resource and practice, because you don't ever want to go into these conversations blind. And why don't you just have Juliana act like a crazy employee, or the other employee that I could have done, which, is not as effective as the one with the attitude, is the one that doesn't say anything. So when you are dealing with an employee who just doesn't say anything, you'd say, I really want to hear from you. Tell me a little bit more about what challenges stand in your way. And if they still don't talk, you'd say, I really want to give you this opportunity to talk to me. I really want to hear from you, right? Like, you really want to let them know that this is all about them and you want to learn from them and get deeper. And then sometimes you'll get commitment and they still don't perform. So you could say, listen, we've been down this path before. We've talked about this, you've committed, and we're not seeing that progress. Tell me what's in the way, right? Like, find another way to say it if someone is just not giving you any context.
Allyns, and I just want to do a time check. I know, do you have a hard stop? Or are you okay with staying for a couple more minutes?
Let me see.
I want to make sure we respect your time because we're so thankful for it.
Okay, let me check because I'm for some reason not getting escape. Okay, I am good. I have a meeting in half an hour.
I have a question for you. When you're dealing with fragmented teams, right? So you've got employees, right? And you're setting expectations for the employees, but you also have contractors, right? Or people who are working for you, and you want to keep, an equal level of performance across the board, but not everyone is going to be legally treated the same. Right? Is there a difference in these communications that you're having with people who are not employees to make sure that they're still being held accountable?
Yes, and there's a similarity and there is a difference in the way that you communicate it to them. So the similarity is the expectation is what it needs to be, right? There's no wiggle room there. I need you to do X. I expect that from you. That's what we contracted for. And you can say, listen, we really need to talk about your scope of work and your deliverables. The same way I hold my team accountable, that our employees, is the same way that I need to hold you accountable. And I need to see consistency across the board in terms of the way that I manage the work expectation. That being said, let's talk about deadlines, right? Like you've got to kind of like paint the picture of like, here are my employees, here are my contractors, you have your scope of work, they have their scope of work. The expectation is the same. I expect you to deliver on what you were contracted to do. And if you're not, we're going to have a conversation about it and see what needs to happen in order for you to perform. And then kind of go into the same conversation, but just differentiate the fact that they are contractors and employees, but that your expectations for their scope of work is the same.
Very cool. I think it's super helpful. Any other questions, guys?
I like that because I was thinking of that because I have a lot of contractors, and that's a good kind of like beginning. But do you? I mean, is it like strike one, strike two type of deal? Like I'm planning to have one next week with a contractor, right? And like you said, like you can just fire or whatever, but I want to give people an opportunity. So like, how do you like document it, but they're not an employee? Like, how do I let them know, like, we're documenting this, or do we say something like that? Like, I don't, documenting also sounds very harsh.
No, I wouldn't say that you're documenting it, but you definitely would not tell them, but to still document it, because there's still someone that you're asking for deliverables for. Okay, Shasta, see you later.
Thank you so much.
I think the challenge is going to be what your terms of the contract are. There always should be terms in the contract for not meeting the scope of work. And so if they're not meeting the scope of work, you can forego any 30 or 60 or 90-day notice. So I think you would go back to like what the performance clause in the contract is. If you don't,
there's no like clause, because again, like we can't treat them like employees, right? So I just wanted to kind of like almost do I maybe it's a good segue. Do I put something in here like, this is how we do, performance tracking based on your contract, or do I never put something on that and I just do something verbal, like, but I'm ready basically like, this is our, like, get them to know this is our culture and our cadence.
Right. Do they have a contract? Do they have a scope of work that you?
Yeah. We like, this is your roles, responsibilities. Here's what your minimum hours per week that we promise to you.
Right. And so in terms of like deliverables, that's when I would just say to them, we're not seeing the output that we are contracted for. We're not seeing the deliverables that we're contracted for. And I want to just make sure that you're providing me what we contracted to do. Otherwise, we're going to have to sever the relationship. And that's not something that we want to do. Less pleasantries with a contractor, honestly, because you're not looking for the Department of Labor here. They're contractors. You can end the contract for anything that you need to, but it needs to be in that scope. If they're not meeting the scope, then you can let them go. And that's what I mean. Like if you have a 30 or 90 or 60-day termination clause, like how do you end the relationship with a contractor? Is it in your contracts?
No, I think contractors, you can just end it that day. If you like, we don't have to give a warning. It's not a good fit. I think today's our last day.
Exactly. So if you do have the courtesy conversation of saying, listen, like, I don't see you meeting that scope of work. I want to continue doing this. Can I see a better turnaround? You can let them go for any reason at any time, even though you have the contract, but as long as the terms are there, because I have different contractors as well. And I'm giving them 15 days notice of termination of the contract based on scope of work or performance. But if the performance is gross and we're not getting exactly what we contracted for, it's a 0 day, then we just let them go immediately. So maybe it's a review of your contract that you want to do that has a performance clause in there.
I see. with this person too, like we like to start people as contractors for several months because depending on the role, this person, the goal is to get them full time. They're a project manager. So you try to, for lack of a better terms, you treat them like an employee. You talk to them. You know, how's your day? Like, you know, because you kind of see if there's a fit culturally. But at the end of the day, they're still a contractor. So is it a blend? It's very similar to the exercise we just did together, you and I. So it's still a blend of that. It's like you go over the terms, the contract, but let's uncover these roadblocks, right?
But remember, now you just gave us a very important piece of information, the what's in it for this contractor. What's in it for them is to get hired full time. So I would lead with that and say, I really want to hire you full time. Here's what we need to talk about. Deliverables on the scope of work. Here's what I'm seeing. I really want to consider you for a full-time position. And in order to do that, I need to see X. So you can leverage that information because that's what he wants, right? He or she or them. That's what they want. So again, hit them with the what's in it for them in order for you to get what you need out of that contractor.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then I have one last question. When you feel or founders feel like you're just being fucked over, right? So like you are doing a massive project, right? And someone takes like a sick day like without notice, right? Like right in the middle of like high volume day, doesn't come in for the client, and like there's been no signs of being sick, right? Like I mean, like sometimes you're like, oh man, they've been coughing, they're gonna take off, crap, right? But like it's just poof, or you know, employees are, you know, you feel like there's collusion amongst employees, right? Where they're like damaging morale, and these things happen, right? So what do the conversations look like? And maybe it's a longer conversation about conversations, but is there kind of a shorthand to kind of identify these things? Because everything around this, right, there's two things that get messed up: workflow and morale, right? And as a byproduct, it shows other employees that these things are okay, right? Which they're not, right? And so like you're kind of dealing with a lot of different dynamics in those situations, and I was wondering if you could touch at least a little bit about it as we close out, because I think that's going to be useful for everyone watching this afterwards.
I do think that having a conversation about passion for the job, right? And like, is this just a job or is this a career, right? So I think if somebody just takes a sick day and like doesn't care that they are missing this big client meeting or this big launch or whatever it is, there should be a follow-up conversation and say, listen, I know you had to take a sick day. I want to really talk about where's your future? You know, like what do you really want in this career? You missed a really important moment when we launched this for this client. And what I'm pretty sad about is the fact that you didn't get that bit of learning that comes with that experience. And so I want to learn a little bit more about where your passions are, or like, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing that passion. Like, do you really want this kind of role? Where do you see yourself going? Right. So there's that one conversation that I can pick up on from what you were saying. Then the other thing is about getting deep into the client, into the psyche of all of your employees. So I have successfully, thankfully, yesterday, I kind of closed out with a client that I've been working with for 3 years. We're just doing like 1 or 2 hours a month, just maintenance. He was riddled with Glassdoor comments, riddled with Glassdoor comments. I mean, racist remarks, just like everything that, and he didn't respond to any of them, and brought me in through a recommendation of his accountant, who's one of my good friends. And I said to him, the first thing I said is, we need a climate survey. We need to give people an outlet to tell you what the deal is about working at this company and all the gossip and things that are going around. And then we need to tackle every single thing. And if you're not committed to tackling every single thing and actually getting up in front of people and saying, here's what I heard, here's what we're doing, and here's how we're going to move forward from here. Like, you have to be committed as a business owner to stand up and say, here's what we're going to do about this problem that we learned about, even if it's a very, very tough issue, even if it's something that you don't want to tackle. So for example, I did a climate survey, and this client had a lot of racist, sexual jokes coming from one of their major VPs. And this was affecting a lot of people in the staff. So guess what? I can't ignore that. That's a legal problem. So I got up in front of the entire company. I said, we learned a lot of good things and a lot of things that we need to tackle. But one of the things that we need is disclosure now. Some serious things were said about comments that are made in this company behind the scenes that we actually need to address head on. I will be on the 3rd floor, or I will be here, call me, and we're actually going to start to tackle these very, very serious issues. The other thing is to provide a 24/7 suggestion box. I do this for a couple of my clients. They have an open forum at any point, at any hour, as many times as they like, can submit feedback, comments, questions, or anything to the company, and we respond on Slack, every single comment. And so we get a lot of them. Can we get more PTO days? I heard that this manager is really making life a living hell for this person. What are you guys doing about it? I want more mental health days. We want more resources for mental health. I got that one the other day. There are outlets that people need so that they're not amongst themselves talking, that they are a part of a culture that's inclusive, but you need to provide those resources for them. You need to tell them, here's where you go, and we will answer. And as soon as you answer publicly on Slack or on Teams or on email or at an all hands meeting, as soon as you start tackling that, the more people come forward with information until you literally have nothing. This client that I just kind of finished off with, that we're just doing 1 or 2 hours of maintenance, I get no comments. It's been almost a year now. Well, a little bit over. I got some probably right at the start of COVID and when they're closing, whatever, or opening. If you tackle it head on, people then go to you as opposed to going to their friends and creating this like gossiping situation. So you've got to create resources for everybody to give you the information directly. And it doesn't feel good. It really doesn't. I like human problems. I love them. Give me your people problems. I like to solve them. And it takes commitment, and it takes time, and it takes actual resolution that you're going to stand behind. And that's the part that kind of CEOs miss, is that like, I don't have time for these people problems. Well, guess what? We're going to make time, but here's a solution, execute on this, and you're going to be a much happier CEO.
Very cool. And then for the Slack channel, because I think that's something that's very tangible that people can do now. What does that look like? Does that look like a open channel and everyone's just kind of putting their shit out there? What does that look like in actuality?
Yeah, thank you. Because like I was like, how did someone submit something anonymously? And then I understand the open like general channel, so everyone sees it.
So we use SurveyMonkey. I use SurveyMonkey for my clients. So the 24/7 board is a link that we put on Slack and say, here's where you can submit your responses anonymously. It goes to me all anonymously. I then send it to the business owner with all of the suggestions on what they should say, or asking for, information like, what is this? Who is this? Let me get some information. Let me see if I can make a really good recommendation. And then all the responses are posted on Slack. So it says, we recently got a suggestion box post regarding mental health. Here's what we're going to do about that. And then we just kind of create this database of information, and whatever else they tell me, they either tell me directly, which a lot of them are now comfortable going to me directly and telling me the feedback because they know I'm not going to reveal their name, or they just continue to use the anonymous box. I reposted it every beginning of the quarter. I post it. I just posted mine on Monday, and I got 5 new messages this week. And I hadn't heard from anybody in like weeks. But that's what you do. You continuously remind them, we've got a forum for this. We want to hear from you. If you don't want to tell us the feedback directly, give it to us indirectly, anonymously, and we will do something about it. And I also say, if you include your name, you will get a direct response from me. You and I will have a conversation. And I've only gotten one person who's brave enough to leave their name, but it was a good conversation because I was like, well, tell me more about this. Like, tell me what is so important about this particular perk that you want that you feel is really important for the firm. And I could actually get deeper than just like receive a comment and action it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think the 24-hour box is something that's super implementable, especially for the smaller teams. And maybe you and I can work together to kind of create a screenshot, an anonymous screenshot of what it looks like in real life, like in Slack, and then I can put it in the Ticker Talks so that people can kind of view how to implement that. Because I think that's really clutch for having that constant feedback from their employees and their teams.
People want to talk. They want to talk, and they're going to talk to each other rather than talk to you. You want them to talk to you, even though it doesn't, like I said, doesn't ever feel good, but you need it. You need it. You need to know what they're saying.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I think this is hyper valuable. I'm so excited that we're going to be able to have this resource for as long as Kajabi lasts. And I'll send you all the stuff, and it's just thank you for being here and for really giving us systems for communication, because that's basically what we've done today.
And I hope you all practice your difficult conversations and become like the best negotiator, the best manager, somebody who the staff feels like they can talk to and are listened to and feel supported by. That's what you want as the outcome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I feel a lot confident into this talk I'm going into next week. So this is super helpful.
Good.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Love it.
All right.
Bye, guys.
All right,
Bye.
we'll do it again.